Thank you for those welcoming remarks. Next, I want to introduce John Bravender from the National Weather Service to give us the 2026 dry season outlook.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here. When Elizabeth called me and asked, said, "Hey, you want to come talk about the dry season outlook?" I said, "Sure." She said, "Talk for 20 minutes." I'm like, yeah, don't know if that'll happen. But we wanted to talk about the upcoming weather patterns, and then also offer a chance to ask any questions. So after done talking, be thinking about what you might want to hear more about if I don't cover it. And then once I got here this afternoon, talking with people beforehand, it became pretty apparent. Y'all know what's coming. We have all the fun of La Nina wet season followed by an El Nino hurricane season on the horizon. So what that means for us, we've seen how wet March and April was, and February and January before that. So we have a very wet season so far, which is pretty typical of the La Nina wet season. Going into the summer, we're transitioning, we're neutral now, we're expecting El Nino to develop. That typically means a active hurricane season for us from a tropical cyclone standpoint. But from a rainfall standpoint, we're a little bit maybe above normal. There's not such a strong correlation with the rainfall for the dry season. But the problem is that we had so much rain during the wet season, so much vegetation grew so rapidly, that even a slightly wet dry season is still going to be really dry. So just put that on your horizons now. The summer's going to be problematic as far as the fire season goes, just because we've had so much vegetation growth. It's green now, and it'll very quickly turn brown. So beyond that, the other outlook coming up, May 21st, we're doing our annual hurricane season outlook. That will have the official numbers, but as we go into an El Nino summer, the climate forecasters that we work with have referred to it as a robust El Nino. They're trying to avoid the term strong, very strong, or as I've actually heard some places, dare I say Godzilla, which I've never heard before, but is something that has come up recently. So a robust El Nino, which tends to be warmer waters in the Pacific, and not just warm right along the equator that's used for defining the El Nino, La Nina pattern, but also near us. We're already seeing waters around Hawaii get warmer than normal right now. As we go into the summer, we could see more of that. And what does that mean for our weather patterns? In addition to an active hurricane season, one thing that we see during El Nino summers is weaker trade winds. Either weaker trade winds or trades breaking down more often. So lighter winds, warmer waters near us might mean more humidity. So those are a couple of the mitigating aspects related to the upcoming fire season. So we have a lot of vegetation that'll dry out. Maybe winds won't be as strong, maybe it'll be more humid, but that's no guarantee. So that's why the relationships we develop here and the focus that we have going forward is really important as we go into this dry season. The other aspect Elizabeth asked me to talk about was a refresher of the National Weather Service products that we issue related to the fire weather program. Top of mind is the red flag warnings. And that's something that we'll be adjusting as we go into this summer. We don't have the details finalized yet. We'll be sharing more information as we go through the month. But we are updating the procedures. So instead of having one threshold for the state, we're breaking it down county by county. We're including land managers in the process. So determining when a county or when an island is in play as far as potential to burn, not just relying on a KBDI threshold, lowering that, putting more of a subjective assessment of the fuel conditions to set the stage for starting the red flag season, and then tying in wind thresholds island by island through windier zones. We're still sticking with the 45% threshold. That seems to be tied very well to changes in fire behavior below that, and then winds tying island by island. So look for that information coming later as far as the extreme ends for those critical fire weather days. In the meantime, we're also trying to standardize some of the language that we use in our fire weather planning forecasts and area forecast discussions to try to heighten the awareness that on an average summer Hawaii day, there's an elevated fire risk. That would be very, very rare to have a low fire risk day in this state. Heighten that awareness for that in-between, it's not quite the extreme case, it's not quite those, it's certainly not safe. So trying to get a better way to communicate those risks and those hazards on a day-to-day basis. With that, another change that we made this past spring is our fire weather planning forecast. We're doing that twice a day now. Previously, we were updating that every morning. We'd send it out at 5 a.m. Now we're doing it in an afternoon regular forecast as well. So like we send most of our products out twice a day, we're doing that updated as well. So the fire weather forecast will have the updated information. Each new shift that comes on, evaluating the new model data comes in, an updated forecast. So those are the two key issues that I wanted to touch on. And now I'm interested in hearing what you also want to hear about if you have any questions. Raise a hand, shout out a question. I'll try to address it.
I have one to start you off. A lot of people were surprised. Okay, do I need that?
I can also repeat the
Okay.
question as you.
A lot of people thought those strong winds from Lahaina that were generated because of Hurricane St. Louis was like the first time that ever happened. But we've seen that, it's been published on. Can you talk about can you just talk about that that's not like a one-off that?
Okay, so talking about the winds in 2023 associated with Hurricane Dora, or well, distantly associated, indirectly. That we were over, the hurricane was over 600 miles away from us. So we weren't in that hurricane wind field. But we've seen many times where a hurricane passing distant from the state, no direct impacts to the islands, will increase the winds, make it much windier, make it much drier as well. Not to get too technical, in a hurricane, there's a lot of air rising and going up. And then as it goes up, it has to go down somewhere else. So around it, you have the sinking motion outside of it. That sinking motion will dry out and create a very, in Hawaii, we normally have we call a trade wind inversion, focusing about 7,000 feet, 8,000 feet. For normal trade wind showers, that would get compressed lower as well, so that as that inversion drops, it thinks as almost a lid on the atmosphere, and as it gets down towards ridgetop, you get this compression and acceleration of winds, leading to downsloping windstorms like we saw in 2023. That is not an unusual, it's not a common frequency, but it's not unusual. We had a similar pattern actually just a few years before that, 2018, with Hurricane Hector passing south of the islands. A couple very large fires with that, north of the track, enhanced trade winds, very dry air. So just because a hurricane is distant from the islands doesn't mean you can't have a direct, or I should say indirect impact, have a significant influence on our weather patterns and lead to critical fire weather behavior. And as another hurricane comparison, even when it's not far away from the state, if you look at 2018 again with Hurricane Lane, even as rain bands were starting to affect part of Maui, another part was on fire. And you can have these very strong winds out ahead of the hurricane. From a meteorological standpoint, trying to forecast a distinction between this part of an island raining, this part of an island so dry that you could have a wildfire is just beyond the science that we have. And that's something that you just have to keep in mind, that the risk is there and the threat is there as these systems come through. So even as a hurricane approaches, doesn't mean, it's a hurricane, there's a lot of rain, we're safe from fires. So something to keep in mind.
There was a period of time when a red flag warning was something that a lot of the community had no idea what it meant. And very recently we had Kona Low 1, Kona Low 2, then we had a low, but it seemed like some of the lived experience of those in the minds of some of our community at least was like, oh, that felt like a hurricane. You know, and I don't know if there's ever been an emphasis on whether or not at some point it changes to something more severe, because we're used to, it started at a hurricane and then now it's a tropical depression. And so I'm just wondering if there's an effort, if you would, because certain words trigger certain reactions in many communities. And so what I think we want to prevent in the future is making sure that when people think of a low, they're not just thinking, okay, it's not that bad, but the wind may become 60 miles an hour, but doesn't quite qualify as a hurricane. And when you work in an operations center, that lingo is very fluid. But in the community, it's hard for people to prepare for stuff like that because they don't really know how bad a low could be, or even a red flag warning. So I just, it's not really a question, but I'm just curious, because we see you all the time, every time there's a briefing. So nice to see you in person. But I'm just curious, I mean, how do we make that more user-friendly? So that way the community doesn't have to flood Kima or Mima or Haima or anyone else, and then come to well, I don't know what to do because it's really windy outside, and I thought it was just going to be a little bit of rain. So I mean, just, do you have any thoughts on that?
That's I actually have many thoughts. Not sure where to begin. That's essentially, you've described the need for my job as a warning coordination meteorologist in a nutshell. The fact you highlighted the issues with hazard communication. Latching on first to the concept of the red flag warning. When we developed these back in the early 2000s, this was mainly geared towards responders, land managers, first responders, to highlight the potential days for extreme fire growth and difficult control problems. And it's become a public product. More people are familiar with it. So it becomes an issue of, well, now we have to define what this means to people. And then the challenge in a non-red flag day is the fire hazard is still there. It's not that it's, oh, if there's no red flag, you can't have a big fire. You absolutely can have a big fire. It's just it's not those extreme critical days. And that goes back to some of the conversations that we've had with Wildfire Management Organization, that to bridge that gap between a regular trade wind day and the extreme day, how we get that community preparedness message out there. So that's one of those hazards that we're still struggling with. And then referring back to the weather systems that we had in March and April, that is a whole other challenge. Another comparison you can make was in, I think it was 2021, Tropical Storm Linda it was a tropical storm east of the islands. It became extratropical. It lost its thunderstorms, but it was still coming through. We still had wind damage from it. We still have some heavy rain. But because there were no tropical storm warnings with it, people didn't think, oh, well, it must be over. It wasn't a concern. We still had wind damage from it. You see the same thing with something that weakens to a depression. Oh, it's not named anymore. Or it's a remnant moisture coming through. In 1994, Hilo got 14 inches of rain in 6 hours from a remnant depression and caused massive floodings, even on the winter side of the Big Island. So it's things like that that has been a challenge for a long time, how to get that message out. And the Kona low versus low, that was a whole fun distraction in April. And in reality, it didn't matter what you called it. We're trying to focus on the impacts. We're talking about rain. We're talking about wind potential. And it became an issue because when somebody would ask me as a meteorologist, is this Kona low? Well, technically no, I have to explain why. And the distinction between extratropical low, Kona low, subtropical, or tropical cyclone is there. The setup is there, but really what we want people to focus on are the impacts. And you make a good point about different different weather names cause people to think different things. And that's our challenge, my challenge as an agency and our challenge as a group is how we get that, is either get that awareness raised in the community or how we change our message as far as communication goes, as far as what those hazards are, whether this is a tropical storm or whether this is a strong cone of low with damaging wind gusts. Impacts might be the same. And we trying to get people to treat that the same is that's a big challenge. And I guess I had thoughts on it, but I didn't have any answers, unfortunately. But I'm glad you raised that point.
So maybe a suggestion, we can call it Honolulu, Maui High, all good. But maybe we could assign a hazard threat level for whatever it is. So
Code
people
yellow,
automatically-
code orange, code
we had
red.
a scale of 5 hazard levels, or threat levels if you would. We said, okay gang, it looks like 2, but it could be 3, so plan for 4.
Yeah. It's funny, no matter what you call it, one of our forecasters was doing an interview, and she said, Konolo, whatever you want to call it, it's all semantics. And the reporter he was talking to was, my job is dealing in semantics.
That's a whole other level. The chef doesn't have tsunami threat, because on that little beautiful graphic they put on the newspaper on the sea, the whole island of Lanai was dark red. So basically, to the layman, it looked like there was no place anybody could go to escape it.
That's right. So if you didn't hear that, the tsunami hazard communication versus coastal versus inland threats, it's definitely communicating those hazards is a challenge across the board. Yeah, sure.
So the federal cutbacks to NCAR, I have a really loud voice. It doesn't matter if I use it. So have those impacted your office here, your ability to process the information, to get the forecasts out?
That has been a big challenge. As far as budgetary cutbacks, we rely on the National Center for Atmospheric Research. A lot of weather research and modeling come from this is a big, a warning, don't talk about this. From a budget standpoint, National Weather Service last summer, we were declared a public safety agency. We're exempted from the hiring freeze. We're hiring meteorologists. We're trying to staff up. There's a big gap to fill. So we're still struggling to get people into the agency, but we are doing that. So from a manpower standpoint, we are improving. From the research and operations standpoint, that's where there's concern. We rely on so much work with the university communities. My office is located for now on the University of Hawaii campus. Professors in the Met department upstairs, we get their model data, they run their own computer models. We can import that into our system. But they're all non-operational. We call them non-operational, meaning they're not supported 24/7. So if a computer goes down, it's not going to be restarted necessarily on the weekend. And it's the transition from the research and development into 24-hour support that's the big stumbling block. And there's something that came up in the 2023 report was we have a high-resolution rapid refresh model that is one of a variety of computer models we pull in, but it's not supported 24/7. And it was interesting talking with some researchers. at different universities that, this showed 80-mile-an-hour winds in Lahaina. You're only forecasting 65. You should have been higher. Well, yes, but that's just one of those models, and it's not 24/7. We can't necessarily rely on it. It was available then, but sometimes it's not. So that's where having this 24-hour support is really important and really comes into play. And I think I've drifted off the topic, so hopefully that is enough of an answer.
Good, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much. And I'll be here today and tomorrow, and we have another forecaster here, Gandhi Kino, who will be coming over from our office tomorrow. So look for us during the day tomorrow in case you have any follow-up questions or want to talk about anything more. Thank you.